Many people totally disagreed with me when I said 65 pence per kilowatt hour was a cheap rate. Extortionate, rip-off, profiteering were words used. I'm Dave, welcome to Dave Takes It On. I think people have misunderstood exactly what I said because I've also predicted a price war coming soon. It's actually already here. Well, let's see if we can unravel this. Well, to see why the price of EV public charging is so ridiculously expensive, you need to look back a few years, somewhere between, just before about 2000, when governments began to get concerned about pollution and climate change. Add in a bit of fuel insecurity and the utter monopoly of the oil giants, and people started looking for alternatives. They had seen major changes like the lunar buggy that was electric and satellites powered by solar panels since the 1960s. Well, unlike popular beliefs, this movement was not driven by EVs, but by wind and solar farms. EVs were seen as a bit of a joke and didn't really arrive here till about 2010. Well, as solar and wind farms sprang up, so the movement grew. The first large-scale PV farm arrived in 2012 with a 32 megawatt farm. By comparison, the largest today is still only 72 megawatts. Round about now, the first onshore wind farm had been built at Daly in Cornwall, served as a working museum and shop. And by 2000, there were several more. With the wind and PV came finally the EVs, but the early charging was an absolute chalk and cheese business. Tesla got their supercharger network up and running as the first cars hit the UK, while Ecotricity, backed by huge government grants, set up a monopoly that became the electric highway. It was mostly 50 kilowatt, few and far between, hopelessly unreliable right from the go. There was no real interest for investment because most people expected EVs to fizzle out once again. But at this time, they took off. By 2017, with the launch of the better priced Model 3 and an already extensive supercharging network, they finally were here to stay. But apart from Tesla, nobody else really gave much thought to rapid and ultra-rapid charging. Few half-hearted attempts have fizzled out, till we reach about 2018 when people sat up and took notice. Shortly afterwards, governments began to offer grants, very attractive ones, and the new EV charging infrastructure began to take shape. But EV charging turned out to be almost as difficult as making EVs was for the legacy auto. Most people did not understand it, nor understand what motorists wanted. But apart from Tesla, which shone out as a beacon of how to do it properly, others began grabbing government grants and commissioning CPOs, charge point operators, to run and maintain the new charging stations. It was mostly funded initially by a small group including BMW, Daimler, Ford, VW, Audi and Porsche, but it was a mere token effort, and actually that fizzled out as well. CCS2 then became standard, and as the EV market grew, so by about 2020, the money arrived. Now, investors were really keen to look for new markets, particularly green technology, and they poured absolutely billions into it under two false beliefs. First, they saw that the average price being charged was 79 pence a kilowatt hour, and electricity was an awful lot cheaper than that, in fact, sometimes even given away. Secondly, the only player able to undercut their newfound monopoly was Tesla, who actually couldn't. They had their own technology and plugs which didn't fit other cars, were exclusively for Tesla drivers only, so out of the equation. Well, safe in those two facts, they invested heavily. And that's where we get the law of unintended consequences coming down with a mighty smash to shatter it all. The charging networks were at this stage pathetic. Chargers were poor, no money was allocated for maintenance and repair, so they were not even maintained, and they became very quickly unreliable. They were already slow. It was not going well, and the BMW and Audi group wouldn't put in any more money, but governments would, and investors also would. The governments offered money, but nobody was really in the mood to go chasing after a failure, to get it working, or to start a new failure. So for a few years, nothing much happened, till about 2020, Joe Biden and both Boris Johnson saw a way out. You see, offer grants and subsidies, tax breaks, but set a standard that said that all chargers must be open to all EV drivers. Well, absolutely brilliant on paper. What could go wrong? Well, everything as it happened. Within a year or so, it was clear it was already a failure. Many had grabbed the money, but then fitted cheap or nasty chargers and didn't look after them. So in a flash of genius, it was Joe Biden, he approached the only person in the world that actually really knew what he was doing and had the world's largest, most reliable and cheap charging network, Elon Musk and Tesla. And he was not slow to spot what was happening. He didn't need the government. His drivers didn't need them. But the government desperately needed the existing massive Tesla supercharger network and needed him to speed up his already fantastic rate of installing huge new superchargers. Oh yeah, and make Teslas change their plug for the European CCS2. Obviously that never happened. The government caved in and the NACS became the world standard that all had to adopt, apart from Europe, who still insisted on the inferior CCS2. And nobody spotted the result. See, Tesla average price was around 45 pence, but exclusive to Tesla drivers up until then, and others were selling at about 79 pence thereabouts. Well, up until now, Tesla had been happily paying for building, installing and maintaining the supercharger network. And suddenly the government offered to do all that for him. Well, as long as he made his chargers open to all. Well, he refused, but the compromise finally agreed was he'd open up some of the existing ones and most of the new ones to all, while maintaining most of the existing network as a monopoly for his own drivers. The price battle had started, but got off to a really terribly slow start. 99.9% of the EV drivers never even spotted it. See, as money poured in from investors and CPOs grabbed government grants and subsidies, they seemed to have absolutely no idea that Elon would not play fair. See, he'd always undercut the competition. Now the government was paying for the chargers and the installation and maintenance, and he could make an even bigger profit from the supercharger network. He could afford to keep his prices very low. The others couldn't. They had no infrastructure, no engineers, no real detailed knowledge, and they were all sharing a very much smaller number of chargers. So the money finally arrived. $500 million went to GridServe, $100 million went to Osprey, almost $500 million set up Apple Green, and so on. And all of them investors and all of them believing they were on a level and fair playing field, they had the monopoly. It was only as recently as last year that one network, I think the first, probably GridServe, at last began to realise that, whoa, hang on, one day soon, Tesla would build one of its superchargers, open to all, alongside a GridServe. And Tesla was going to sell it at 45p, alongside GridServe charging 69p. Well, head in the sand, they seemed to be living in the hope that Tesla would maybe put up the prices. So GridServe grabbed the $500 million from the investors and installed chargers absolutely everywhere, including many sites where Tesla already had a supercharger. The investors then demanded they up the price from 69p to 79p to really cash in, and sat back rubbing their hands with anticipation. Lovely return on the investment. So the day arrived and the first Tesla supercharger that was open to non-Teslas opened on the same site as GridServe. This was Frankly Services southbound on the M5, and Tesla charged 44 off-peak. GridServe charged 79p all day and night. And the result was obvious, and the solution was equally obvious. Nobody used the brand new GridServe chargers. Either Tesla had to dramatically raise prices, or GridServe had to drop them. If neither of them moved, GridServe was out of business. Well, the $500 million invested was now giving no return at that specific brand new site, and everyone knew now that one by one Tesla would in time open up others at different locations and open them to non-Teslas with prices as low as 45p. GridServe also knew that once their customers realised they could charge at most new Tesla superchargers, they would hunt out other locations wherever they went. So back to the original question, why are all the others at 79p? Well, because at present, just enough people use them to leave them there earning money. They also know that most of their EV customers don't know they can use the Tesla's charger network or don't have one nearby. But they also know that one by one their sites will be visited by a Tesla supercharger, and that site will then cease earning anything. I said the war had started. Indeed it has. It's just incredibly slow start. It's likely to take another year or so before it really starts to heat up, but it is already underway. One by one, the non-Tesla chargers, the grid serves, the Ospreys, the Instavolts, the BP Pulse, Shell Reach, they'll just drop out of use as people move over to the cheaper Teslas. And Tesla is installing fast. It already has more than 50 locations in the country up and running that allow non-Tesla cars to charge. And the average number of bays at each supercharger is around 12. That is a mighty network that runs alongside the original Tesla that's still reserved exclusively for Tesla drivers. Are we going to open it all up? So strongly suspect they'll open some more, but they will retain a substantial number, especially where the spare capacity is very limited. See, opening those up to all would seriously inconvenience Tesla drivers who'd be faced with long queues, chargers packed with slow-charging EVs. There is no need for that. Some sites will always remain Tesla only, in my opinion. So for the future, well, there's going to be a slow but rapidly increasing pace of change from non-Tesla chargers to Tesla superchargers. And what about the investment? Well, you'll have to ask GridServe and Apple Green and BP Pulse and MFG what they will do. But I'll tell you what they cannot do. They can't drop their prices from the unsustainable, 79p or 85p. See, here they actually make a good return on each customer who uses that system. But that number will dwindle over time. Could they drop prices? No point whatsoever. They can't afford to drop down to Tesla levels, so any slight drop will be futile. The customers are not going to return if they drop 10p back from 79 to 69. It's all or nothing. Match Tesla and hope more people use your chargers, but even that won't work. One of the main selling points of Tesla Supercharge, they are superbly reliable and they have a network of mobile engineers keeping them that way, fixing faults often the same day or the next day. Who is going to go back to the unreliable, low-power, broken chargers of just a year or so ago? But the next battle in this war is not going to come from the EV charging networks like GridServe, Ionity and Osprey and others. It is much more likely to come from the investment funds that financed these charging networks for their massive expansions. Because they cannot attract investors if they have no return, no profit on those funds. At some point, these investors will just cut their losses and withdraw their funds. They will happily head elsewhere to get a better return. Money talks, and here the money is controlled by individual investors, many of whom have no idea what the fund actually invests in, merely that it's green and promises a great ethical and financial return. When it doesn't have a financial return, they've got no loyalty. They will simply move their funds elsewhere. Well, that will be the final battle in the EV public charging price war that has already been won. The losers just don't know it yet. They will in time. I'm Dave. Well, thanks very much for watching. If you have enjoyed it, please click the like button. It does make a difference to us. If you would like to see more videos, please subscribe and click the notification bell. We can notify you every time we release a video. If you want to support us more, have a look at our Patreon membership. There's details for that down below, but you get additional benefits as a Patreon member. A massive, massive, massive thank you to all the existing Patreon members and a few new ones who've just joined us. Thanks for watching. I'm Dave.